You are listening to the Spent the Rent podcast. And now, here's your host, Patty Rose.
Hello, I am Patty Rose. Welcome to the Spent the Rent podcast. This is episode number 224. My guest today is the new mayor-elect from Eugene, Oregon, Kaarin Knudson. Kaarin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Patty. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, you were a student athlete at the University of Oregon. You ran track, later taught at the U of O with a focus on sustainable urban design. You worked as the president of the Eugene City Club, various other committees, and back in 2023, you decided to step up and run for mayor of Eugene, Oregon. And I had you on back in December of last year.
Yes.
And it's about 6 months before the midterm campaign. And in the midterm, in a nonpartisan seat in Lane County, the way that it works is if you receive over 51%, there was no runoff in November. So we're going to talk a little bit. Your name will be on the ballot.
Yes.
And I think it's still helpful for people if they have a yard sign for them to put it out for you. And can you explain why?
Absolutely. So thank you for that background. Yes, indeed. I'm very proud. And thank you, Eugene voters, for giving me your vote in May of 2024. In that primary election, I received almost 75% of the votes cast. And as Patty was just describing, in a nonpartisan seat, that essentially means that you are then the only candidate forwarded to the November ballot. It's essentially like you have won the race, but due to really the technicalities of a nonpartisan process, your name is on the ballot again in the November election. And so on November 5th of this year, or by November 5th of this year, Eugene voters will again have an opportunity to select me to be their mayor. But my name will be the only name on the ballot.
You say that essentially that you've won, but they could have a write-in campaign.
There could be an aggressive write-in campaign.
Yeah. So let's not always count our chickens. But, I mean, and I think that there's going to be a lot of perks for the fact that you've had this 6 months, the way that it's set up. And we'll talk about that now.
Yeah.
That you'll be taking over in January. And I know that both former mayors, Kitty Piercy and then the previous mayor, Lucy Vennis, have been extremely supportive. Do you expect that there will continue to be a peaceful transfer of power? I asked you this last time.
And it made me laugh then also, because how is it that we are in these times that this is a question?
Never was a question before 2020.
Yeah, it's a new thing. I think of that time every time I watch my children shake hands with an opposing team that they've lost to on the soccer field. Absolutely, there will be a peaceful transfer of power in Eugene. I'm really grateful to have had the support of our current mayor, Lucy Vennis, previous mayor, Kitty Piercy. She and I were just in a parade together last week in downtown Eugene. I was part of the grand marshaling entry for the Eugene Bright Parade through downtown, dressed as a human disco ball last Saturday night.
The pictures were awesome.
Looking forward to next year's iteration and inviting everyone all across our community to put that onto their calendar and plan to be at the third annual Eugene Bright Parade next September. But it is it's been a great opportunity to have the election in May be so successful, and then really be able to use these months and this time to reach out to the community and just continue to model the kind of public servant that I'll be after being sworn in January, I think January 13th of 2025, and I'll get that out to the world soon. I just heard that date for a State of the City event and inauguration, so to speak, locally. But this time is just really helpful because there are a lot of people who are excited about the future and who I've had a chance to work with in a lot of ways as a professional and as a volunteer and as an educator in our community in this last couple of decades. And I'm just really excited for what we're going to do together in the years ahead. We have some significant hard work to do as a community, but we also, I think, can enjoy that work and our time together in community. And so even things like celebrating the Bright Parade, it's really important to me that we make time for fun and just enjoyment while we're also doing things like tackling, some really significant challenges we have with housing, with homelessness, with services for people who need them, for addiction and behavioral health issues, and just planning for, a great future for our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you know Lucy or Kitty before before you started running?
I did, just a little. I've gotten to know both of them better during this time. So I knew Kitty Piercy, who was the mayor before Lucy Vinnis. So 8 years ago was when Kitty Piercy left office. And she and I really got to know each other through volunteerism with the City Club of Eugene. She was the president-elect, I believe, when I started volunteering as part of the City Club's program committee. Brief pitch to anyone who was interested in coordinating and organizing conversations, even kind of like this one, about civic issues and community needs. The City Club of Eugene Program Committee is who puts together all of those 40-plus free public events that are both real-time public meetings this year at the WOW Hall, but also our podcasts and delivered live and remote thanks to other fantastic volunteers at City Club. Shout out to that whole AD team. And so Kitty and I got to know each other through that, and I was asked to become City Club's president following Kitty's tenure. And then Lucy Vinnis I had gotten to know over this last 8 years, essentially through my housing advocacy work. I knew her a little bit when she was elected because of her work with shelter care and within our nonprofit community, but like many people, got to know her a lot better as she was our mayor. And I think that that's interesting because, you know, she got to know me as a person who was working to try to bring our community together around important actions on housing. And, you know, in a lot of ways that probably was very influential to her in her support and encouragement to consider running for mayor. So she was one of those people who had suggested that idea to me in these past several years. And
which that's got to be, I mean, obviously now you've been successful and you've won, but you're still a human being that had to, when someone came to you, that's the sitting mayor and is like, you should run. That's got to feel like, what?
Yeah.
You know,
well,
like,
that's very true. And this is something that's been on my mind because yes, I'm a human being. Who's
I say that because you're humble, you know, because I know, it's still, no matter what, before you get into those positions, everybody's got to think like, I couldn't do it. Do you know what I mean?
One of the things that I learned through this process is that, because it's been about a decade since the first time that a close friend, colleague said to me, we were having coffee talking about some really important work we have to do as a community. And they said, I wish you would run for office. I wish you would think about that. And I interpreted that overture, and the reason I'm sharing this is because I think a lot of people who maybe have been encouraged to run for office, especially local office of any kind, probably did the same thing. I interpreted that overture as a compliment. When they said, I wish you would run for office, I wish you would represent me or help us work on this issue and these issues, I thought, oh, that's just a nice way of saying I have a lot of respect for you. And probably that's because at that point in my life, I was very busy as, you know, a young professional, early mid-career professional, young parent, feeling a lot of fulfillment in my life and also feeling like I was doing a lot to serve my community through the work that I was doing at that time. But I guess this is just a thought to anyone who is listening to this podcast right now and thinking, maybe I might someday want to consider doing this. If someone proposes the idea of running for office to you, and especially if multiple people from different perspectives within the community say to you things like, I wish you would run for office, I wish you would think about this kind of service, at least give it some thought. And that was my case with Lucy. When she first asked me to consider this path, she very thoughtfully said, just give it some thought.
Yeah.
Because I think she knew I wouldn't, if she didn't say it that
I'm
way.
hoping that anybody that's listening to this heard the first time that you were on, because we went kind of more in depth in who you were as a candidate. And we're going to give a chance for you to talk about your vision for Eugene. But, so if you really want to hear in depth about what got us here, go back and listen to that. But the more that I've watched and seen, and you and I become acquainted behind the scenes, just kind of through Facebook and stuff. But I think it's a natural progression. I was very critical of the fact that you were basically endorsed before we were even introduced to you, essentially, in the community. Yeah. And I say that because I want to make it clear that, like, I'm going to be honest about these things. Like, I'm going to say it how I see it. So I was a little critical. But that being said, as time goes on, there's been so many left turns in this election cycle that I have a different viewpoint than I did then. Because I look at it now, it's like, we got to protect spaces that protect women in a lot of ways. And so I think that now and now Eugene is one of those, and we're proud of the three-peat of the power of the three of you.
Yeah.
And so I'm all for it. And
Well,
and that's checking a box, and I'm the one that said it, but I think you're better. You're more than that. It's not just this isn't a, you're not getting the job because you're a woman. That's not what I'm saying. You know what I mean? But I think you're going to do really good. So.
Yeah, I was just talking with someone the other day a little bit about this framing, and I think with women who run for office, this maybe is especially the case. But I was, just talking with a friend about the fact that, for 9-10 months, I was introduced dozens and dozens of times as Kaarin Knudson, an architect, an educator, a small business owner, and a parent, right? Like all of these roles that are attached to your name and to your identity. And I think that when we look at any elected position, I feel to my very last breath that we really want for people who are experienced and honest and who are serious about the work of trying to help other people and to serve our community's needs, our community's full needs. Those are the people who we need in positions of leadership.
Yeah.
Because when I talk all around the country and around the region about the work of how communities can guide change, and a lot of that relates to housing policy and sustainability, but a lot of that conversation starts with a framing of the work of leadership, and I think we really misunderstand a lot what the work of leadership actually is. And the work of leadership is always going to be calling people forward to imagine something that's not currently in the grasp of the community. It's not currently delivered through the levers of authority or the structure of regulation that exists, but it's the future that we need to build. And we're super fortunate to live in a community, certainly in a state that is very forward thinking about how our laws can support community. That's the truth also in our country. Certainly not every place in the world would I be able to be an elected leader.
No, and I say that, and I don't want to lean into that, like the gender thing, but like me personally, the more I've gotten to know you, one thing that I think is cool, and I'm maybe it's because you were a student athlete, that you are more receptive to maybe different types of humor and things like that. So that I mean, you've liked some of my
because
posts.
Athletes have to be able to laugh.
You've liked some of my comments on social media that I'm like, careful now. I know you might like it, but you might not want to tell anyone else you like it. No, but
really
I'm just saying.
Yes,
but like the reality is,
yeah.
I think it's really funny because I'll make off-putting jokes because that's just my style, and we're also the same we're both in our 40s, so we came up around the same time. We have a similar exposure to certain types of things.
Sure.
So I'm excited because yes, you are representing a progression in the natural progression of what we've seen in the last 3 Eugene mayors, including yourself now. But I do think that it's a natural progression in a way that you're seeing more representative of where things are turning. I think that Kitty and Lucy are both great. I just think that you're a little bit more of something that I would be able to relate to, which is rad. And that being said, that's the way things change. But
I hope people always feel that way about, especially local.
Yeah, we'll see how
elections.
it is at the end.
Well,
No.
it's so funny when because this is an interesting thing to talk about in this experience that since May, especially, so many people. I'm going to tell a quick story that like the day, election night, super exciting, really wonderful, so much encouragement and love and enthusiasm. But what was really fascinating was being out and around, experiencing my daily life in Eugene in the couple of days and really weeks that followed the election. And that experience included being like as far away as, a few miles from any campsite on the McKenzie River Trail and running and having bikers go by the other direction and then hearing someone yell, "You're going to be our new mayor. I voted for you." As they head off, and then being, at the coast, same experience with people who are just excited.
Yeah.
And then being around downtown and folks, people stopping me on the street, gentleman who stopped me in Safeway in the cereal aisle and was like, I'm just so excited to see you shopping with me in Safeway.
I know. It's funny because, and I don't know if this was helpful, and I felt
it's Eugene, and it's,
this cracked me up because my buddy Dan is one of the sports directors for kids sports, and there's Justin Herbert put on that celebrity softball game, and so it was like really rushed, thrown together. It's going to be an annual event, and it's going to be better and better and better every year. But it was a successful, amazing event.
Justin Herbert hit like 800 consecutive
it was
softball
wild
home runs.
So the funny thing is I find myself in a position where Dan was like, hey, dude, do you know how to get a hold of Kaarin? And I'm like, I think she already knows about this, about this event. But I will, yes. And it was an honor to me because I'm like, now because of my podcast and because she's accessible, I do actually have a way that I can correspond with her. And sure, it's Facebook, but like she'll answer my call. And so, and I reached out and I'm like, did you know about this? And you did, because Bev Smith is more connected than Patrick Rose.
And we are Kids Sports family. So both of our kids, our older daughter is now in high school, but she did all sorts of kids sports through her whole young childhood. Our second daughter also does tons of kids sports stuff and camps. We've got like every color of the rainbow of kids sports uniform, t-shirt and drawers in our house. But it's an amazing community organization. The work that they do all across our community every year is awesome. I feel very strongly about the importance of all kids having access to the lifelong holistic health that comes from being able to be active and find joy in physical activity. I think that it's good for your physical health, of course, but it's great for your mental health. It's great for your academic life in school. It's great for your social bonds. Like, we talk so much now about all the things that kids need and are lacking in our current school structure. And so much of it comes back to like, they need more low stakes problem solving time together. Sports offers that. They need more time socializing together outside of the structures of the classroom. Sports offers that. They need to learn how to be disappointed and be excited for themselves or to set goals. That's another avenue. They need to just move their bodies and feel like they can metabolize some of the experience of just being a kid and growing up. So Kids Sports offers that all over.
I just love that Justin Herbert is still remembering his roots and where he came from. I mean, that was such a great event. So I show up at that event and you were surrounded by people and everybody was grinning and smiling and meet and greet moment. But I was touched that like you had already known about it, but like that Dan was like, do you think you could reach out to her? She's on your podcast. I'm like, I don't know her that well. But so it was really neat. But regardless,
always reach out.
That was an amazing event. And next year when it comes around, anybody listening and you see the promotions for the Justin Herbert softball game, absolutely go, because it was awesome. And it's a huge fundraiser for kids sports. So you had mentioned a little bit of your vision for Eugene. So I want to hear, I'm going to give you the floor, and I'm going to leave a really open-ended style question. It's just, what is your vision for Eugene?
Could you ask a larger question
of
a person stepping into this responsibility? So my vision for Eugene is our vision for Eugene, for sure. And when I think about the needs that our community has, but also the opportunities that our community has to both rise to the occasion and live out our best life together, a lot of that comes back to the work that we, of course, are going to do around housing in our community, the opportunity for people to have access to stable and affordable housing that meets, a diverse cross-section of community needs, that helps for us to be more sociable, better connected to one another, more supportive across generations. That is all the work of housing policy, innovation, and things that we need to focus on. And absolutely the most severe expression of the housing crisis in our community is the high instance of homelessness that we have in Eugene. We remain stubbornly near the very top or at the number one position as the most instances of homelessness per capita within the country. And that is staggering and heartbreaking, and also an enormous opportunity for us as a community to step forward with some creative solutions and to work together.
Do you know why that is? Why the homelessness is so rampant here?
Well, the number one reason why that we have such a high rate of citywide homelessness is that we have a lack of housing that is both affordable to the median income and the low vacancy rate. So in any city, when you're looking at a high instance of homelessness, it's not the result of generosity or a lack of generosity. It's not about the rates of serious mental illness or addiction or behavioral health challenges. Fundamentally, the two drivers of a rate of homelessness like what we have in Eugene is that there's not nearly enough housing available. So the vacancy rate is very, very low. And we don't have nearly enough housing that the average household can afford. And that's not my research. That's research from Greg Colburn and Clay Aldrin, who are University of Washington researchers. And Greg will actually be here. I'm working to bring him here for a free community event that will be November 21st. Look for more information about that through my socials, Kaarin Knudson or Kaarin for Mayor, and also with Better Housing Together and all of the partners working as a part of that housing coalition. But that's the fundamental challenge that we face is our housing supply has not kept pace with our population change over the last 40 years. This is across Oregon, also across the West Coast, but especially in Oregon, we can look at that very, very near and absolutely within our community here in Eugene. The other piece to that is that the housing supply that has been produced during that time has not been calibrating, so to speak, to the levels of affordability and the household type that needs housing. So not only have we not built enough housing, but we also haven't built enough housing that is going to be affordable and appropriate for, say, a 1 or 2 person household, right? A younger person, a young couple that has a child under the age of 2, right? Empty nesters, people who are not partnered or find themselves with a different marital status later in life, right? So we haven't done that work, and we really need to work on the diversity of the housing options we have available in our community and the supply of more housing that is affordable for people in our community.
So, I'm going to ask it a blunt question.
Yeah.
Do campus high-rise apartments help with housing in Eugene?
Oh, they do.
I mean, they don't hurt because any more units is not going to hurt, but they are, because they're getting filled with college students. So that means that there's rent. There's other places that aren't going to be filled with college students.
And I saw some work that was done a few years ago that was just looking at when I think the first of those large student housing projects were constructed, that there was some insight to the fact that because of the configuration of those units, they were essentially pulling students out of what would have been, single family detached house, in a neighborhood near a school. So in that way, it is helpful because we do need more of that housing supply. Also, I'll add as an aside that I obviously I'm an architect and I practice in sustainable urban design, and I care a lot about the quality of the built environment that we are constructing around us, the expression of culture that is. And I hope that in the future, that as we are, looking a couple of years down the line at new projects that are, coming into permit and then heading into construction in Eugene, that, we'll also see buildings that are, have a stronger and a better orientation to the public realm, feel better as you're walking against them. But also that there's work that we can do on the public realm as a city and as a community that's also really an important complement to that. So long way of saying we have a whole bunch of work to do on the public realm and the quality of that and the safety of that. But also that new housing supply does help. We need all of it across the spectrum of housing types and building types. But we especially need to focus on housing that is affordable to our workforce and also housing that is affordable to very low income households.
And I mean, I don't think in government, you can't really control how housing is going to be built because it's private investors that are doing that kind of stuff, but you can definitely encourage it. Is that right?
You can encourage and you can steer, right? You can be
there can be some incentives and different things.
Incentives, you can, look at regulatory structure and honestly make sure that we are actually making the path of least resistance, the path that we want the most of those development partners to be working on. We can do more to encourage local development and grassroots incremental development with our community. It's really valuable when you have people living in your community who are actually the folks that decide, you know what, like I'm gonna take out a loan and I'm gonna build, an ADU or a detached duplex or a little cottage, on the back of this property. I'm going to add some units of housing to the supply in our community as an individual actor. That person, right? Maybe just a homeowner and a contractor, maybe just a carpenter who owns their house. They are also a developer in that circumstance, and we can encourage people at that scale all the way up through larger mixed use residential apartment buildings.
Yeah. So I'm going to change gears. We're going to talk. I'm going to paint a picture here. This is I wanted to talk about a scenario that the mayor and city council play a big part of. So this is going to be, we're going to talk about the Breakfast Brigade versus the city of Eugene. So homelessness and poverty continues to be the biggest issue in Eugene. And though there's tons of support, there's also pushback. Recently, the city of Eugene found itself in a fight. The city of Eugene found itself in a fight over permits with folks who want to feed the hungry at Washington Jefferson Park. Do you know if this is weekly or is it monthly? I'm not sure. I'm not positive. The Breakfast Brigade?
Breakfast Brigade, I thought that it was weekly.
It might be weekly. Could be monthly. I'm not positive. Yeah. But the Breakfast Brigade has been meeting there. Okay, here it is. It's every week. Mm-hmm. So the Breakfast Brigade has been meeting there every week and feeding about 150 plus people. As demand has grown and word has spread, the line has grown to over 250 people. And the neighbors are pretty concerned. The city denied the last permit. Can you speak on how you plan to work to balance your relationship with the city council, the taxpayers, and those who need assistance with something as basic as food? And I'm also going to include the advocates or activists that are the ones putting this on. Because sure. Yeah. It's all four groups, really. You got the city council they get a lot of flack for decisions that they make, and it's a tough job. So yeah, how do you balance? Because I think that you're kind of the representative or the cheerleader for all of them. Yeah. So how do you balance that?
That definitely is part of the mayor's responsibility, and I do fundamentally see the role of the mayor as a bridge builder between all sorts of different points in our community, the constellation of our community, and sometimes that bridge is it's easy to connect perspectives or just get people working together on an issue, introduce folks to the possibility of working together, and other times you're trying to repair a relationship and keep people working together. So and I am not not currently sitting at the dais with our council and mayor and city manager and the conversations happening at the city council, but I am engaged in our community, and so I have heard about this controversy. And what I would say is that this controversy is a good example of how important it is that we continuously and proactively find ways to support the basic needs of people in our community. So, Breakfast Brigade, Burrito Brigade, trying to feed people, right? With zero barriers, right? If you're hungry, food is available.
Right.
That was their reason for becoming a local nonprofit. And they've stayed very focused on that very simple mission. And I've had the good fortune several years ago to work with some of their leadership as part of a racial justice cohort that was organized through the United Way, and did some really wonderful work with Banyan Tree Consulting, Terrell there. And the conflict that we have now is that the need is overwhelming the place where access to this food
service,
and basic service resource is being provided. So, and with that, and from what I understand, also some real concerns about ancillary behavior, things that are going on that are, not in bounds, so to speak, with what's expected as a part of this permitting process. And from the little I understand about our parks permitting process, this will come as a surprise to no one listening, that, the city takes very seriously that parks permitting is, very clear cut, very consistent, and that the things occurring as a component of that event or permit are all above board and legal. And that's not meant to persecute people or to not have access to basic needs. It's meant to make sure that we don't have really dangerous and illegal things happening as a part of city permitted processes, right? So that's one part of the grind in this is that responsibility that the city holds. But I do think that, and I do think that there is an opportunity to be creative around this need. I know that for years, Burrito Brigade has had a really well-developed distribution system.
Yeah.
And
this is Breakfast Brigade, and this one, and it's an offshoot, but this one has gotten huge, and so it's tough, and I shout out to the people that put this on, and I know that the city's going to work to work with them, I hope. It's the way the paper makes it sounds like it's a huge fight, and I'm sure that it feels like that, but I think that it's going to be resolved pretty easily.
Yeah, I do think it will, and I do think that and this just gets back to this point about the need to be creative and recognize that this is definitely a both and circumstance. I think it's really important that as we have our community groups and nonprofit sector stepping up to meet critical needs, basic needs that people have in our community, that the city be, of course, always understood as a partner in that effort, as a complement, right? But also that we're supporting that work. Part of that partnering process is to make sure that there aren't sort of unintended consequences or conflicts that arise. And so I do wonder about the possibility of, just creating a little bit of space and also maybe stretching out some of the capacity that current site is meeting, because from what I understand, it really is just kind of a case of overwhelm at the site. And, that speaks to the need, right? So there's no question that, that the work needs to continue happening. It's just an issue of how we do that in a way and keep people together.
What do you say to the neighbors, or not just in this situation, but just in general? Like when you have, because I know that you're going to get this a lot. Yeah. What do you say to people that they're like, I'm tired of these homeless people, or and they're like, I pay taxes, the people that just come with vitriol that have a NIMBY attitude, and I don't want to cast them off as being a bad guy because they're not. You have to understand their frustrations. So where do you stand with that? I got more questions in a minute. We're going to talk about a little bit more about public safety and that kind of stuff. But what do you tell somebody when it's, I guess I'll say it like this. What do you tell them when it's not actually criminal what's happening, where the people maybe are kind of walking up and down their streets, but they're not actually doing something criminal? What do you tell the taxpayer that's irritated about it?
What I guess I would say is that first, I've not yet had anyone say to me, what's going on here? I pay taxes as a sort of statement of entitlement to a level of certainty about the environment. I mean, I think in most cases, if that is the kind of energy that someone's bringing to a conversation, probably my natural reaction will be to just slow things down a little bit. Yeah. Because there's a lot of leaps that are, you can imagine happening in that conversation that probably aren't helpful or productive for any party that's involved. I think that one of the things that's actually been really encouraging to me is in talking with people all around the community last year, I didn't hear anyone say the most kind of inflammatory, tropey sort of things about the crises we're facing.
Good.
What I mostly heard from people was a real concern about, things like wanting to access our parks and open space or trail networks before or after dark.
Yeah.
And feeling unsafe doing that. And that generates, ramifications for that household and how they feel about living in Eugene that is also not positive. I think one of the hardest things about the work that we have to do together in community in these coming years is that while acknowledging that there are people within our community who are in the most vulnerable experiences that we can imagine, and that, and people who also may be struggling with multiple layers of trauma at the same time. And while we're holding that need as central, it's also not the only need in our community, because we actually need for us as a larger collection of people to stay together as we're trying to grapple with these really challenging circumstances. The reason I mentioned I haven't heard anybody just say I pay taxes, we shouldn't have any problems is because, and that's not how you say it, but you're trying to paint that picture, is that I do think that people are actually really interested in how do we make progress?
Right.
How do we do some things that we know are smart and are working? And I have some great news to share, which is that for the issue of housing stability and homelessness. This was in the news this week because Governor Kotek was talking about it. But most people probably remember that right after she took office, she declared an emergency related to homelessness and issued, a really aggressive ask to counties to step up, organize a team, put together priorities, tell us how you're going to deliver a plan, and then we will fund you. We'll give you through the legislative process.
If there's a plan, which I love.
If there's a plan.
I love that.
And so Lane County, and I'm just going to give some shout outs because this is not an area that often gets like a lot of airtime, is that through our, Health and Human Services department at Lane County, not only did they put together like the best and fastest produced plan, right? So already the networks of connections and relationships were in place. But then what we've seen since that funding was allocated a year and a half ago now, or a year ago now, Lane County's all-in project has over delivered or outperformed every estimate that we had in terms of rehousing people, preventing homelessness, producing housing units, and making sure that people have access to affordable housing. And that should be really encouraging, that when you say like 100% and we're going to hit 250% or more with the funding that's created, that's really encouraging, and it is evidence in terms of our thinking about like, how do we make progress? Well, we put together smart plans that have clear metrics and like serious professionals and dedicated folks working on them, and then we check in and we deliver, and then we do it again.
I can tell you why, and I'm just pulling this out of my neck, but I can tell you why that was effective. If the study, I have nothing to back this up, but I'm guaranteeing
with nothing to back it up,
that during the time that study was done, that my partner Dana was working with Health and Human Services as the data analyst for them, and I guarantee her work on those projects is why it was successful, because before I met her, I was in the gutter. So
a little household pride we have for all the listeners out
I just want to give a shout out to the county workers that just do their daily work. I don't care if that is at the dump or if that is a data analyst. Yeah. Those people really get stuff done. I mean, I don't think people understand. And I'm in talks with Lori Trieger about doing an episode about the extent of county work and talk about how the levers of government work at the city, state, and county, or city, county, and state level. And so that would be really cool because...
And Commissioner Trieger will say this herself, I'm sure, something like this or more eloquent when she joins you on the podcast. But issues related to public health, of course, and also to addressing the crisis of homelessness in our community, those are responsibilities that lie fundamentally with our county.
Yes.
The tricky overlap is that Eugene just happens to be the absolute population center of our county as a city. And so when there's the county's dashboard, currently calculates that there's about 4,000 people who are experiencing homelessness within our county. And the city's dashboards currently estimate that about 3,000 of those people are within the boundaries of the city of Eugene. That's, for a variety of reasons, many of which we talked about a few minutes ago, not enough housing and not enough housing that people can afford, which makes it very difficult to access in a very brittle system when you do access housing. But Lori will be able to talk a lot about the ways in which funding from the federal government to our state housing and community services to our county is delivered to actually move forward some of these issues. And then the city and county have to work together really effectively and be really strong, creative partners together to meet both our affordable housing needs, our shelter needs, and our kind of long-term community support.
So now we're going to change gears a little bit again. But beyond resource programs like the Breakfast Brigade, what comprehensive strategies do you envision for addressing homelessness, including mental health and addiction services? And how is this affected by Measure 110? So I guess I really want to talk more deeply about 110. So 110 was the decriminalization of drugs. The state of Oregon rolled back the policy, and it sounds like these decisions will be made at the county level, like you had just talked about. How these decisions, it sounds like each county is going to have a little bit different policy.
Yes.
So I want you to talk on, if you had the control, if you ran the county and the city,
if the mayor of Eugene became the mayor of Lane
County, what would your policy on possession of drugs be? I mean, what is it going to look like in Eugene? Have you sat down and looked at that yet?
So what I would say, and I appreciate the framing and even being able to joke with you a little bit about it, is that it's a very important topic and an area in which recent changes in law are changing how we see response to drug possession on the streets and in public spaces in our community. So the first thing I'll say is that this is also, of course, the purview of Lane County, and Commissioner Trieger or other commissioners or Lane County staff would be the most important folks to talk with about this. What I know about this as a Lane County resident, and also as a future mayor of Eugene, is that Lane County is working really intensively on what will essentially be our deflection process locally. So with the legislature's changes to Measure 110, basically, what that new structure set up was a path through which local counties could say, we don't actually want to be pushing people into the criminal justice system. We don't want to be pushing people into jail. What we want to do is when there's an interface with someone who clearly is in the throes of addiction or is in the process of distributing the means to be addicted, that person have a path to rehabilitation, essentially,
Yeah.
right, and recovery. So that's what the deflection process is about. And the folks who are involved in that locally, I think, have been among our most innovative people nationally around criminal justice and how we can shape that system to be more supportive of people's needs and help get people onto the right track and establish clear boundaries for that, rather than just thinking, we're just going to put all these folks in jail and somehow jail time will be...
We'll somehow fix it.
Recovery. So the deflection process I'm hopeful about, and I think the people here who are working on that, we have a lot of reason to believe in their capacity to do that work really well.
Yeah.
I know, also, of course, and I'll just state the obvious, that we need more funding for mental health services, behavioral health services, not just in Eugene, but in our state. We are near the very bottom of all 50 states in terms of the funding that we put forward to meet those needs. The closure of Oregon's institutions a couple of decades ago, and the completely erroneous assumption that you could have people with experiencing significant mental health challenges and mental illness, that somehow just housing would be enough for people who are living in that experience.
That whole situation.
It puts an enormous pressure on, and you see this now in how we're adapting to it, because we're very adaptive. And that, again, this is like a huge strength in our local capacity. I think of our Lane County Housing Authority, Homes for Good, and the work that they do delivering permanent supportive housing. So much of that work is also trying to fill in a lot of this gap and gray area. Like permanent supportive housing is housing for people who are, as described, are permanently going to need supportive services. Mm-hmm. Another way of understanding that in the most severe experiences that a person might have is that this is a person who needs essentially medical care, but that's being delivered through the lane of housing and our housing authority. And that's a statewide issue that I hope our electeds now and in the future will work to tackle, because we're way behind in addressing those community needs. The harms that people are experiencing living in that way without support are obvious to anyone who encounters someone, especially a person who is person living, unsheltered as a homeless person in that experience. But it's, cascades across our whole community, because I really feel it does not need to be this way. But that is a support that needs to be organized at the state level.
I don't know how. I wasn't very old during the time when the mental hospitals across the state were closed. But I just know how things work. And I know you're in a nonpartisan seat and you're going to hate me for saying this and getting partisan.
I won't hate you.
No,
I'll
but
just wonder
okay,
why.
well, that's good. But I just think it's I don't know how Republicans convince Democrats because I guarantee what happened was Republicans started the conversation. We can't afford this. How do we go about it? And they're like, let's convince Democrats that it's immoral. So if we can convince them it's immoral to have these people in these homes, then we cannot have to pay for it. that's how, I don't know.
I mean, it's I was too young to
me too.
really know what was happening in those decisions.
Follow the money. I mean, I've said it before. I think that gay marriage was never about morals. It was about the insurance companies didn't want to fund their partners. I think right now, I don't know the economic reason for to be against abortion rights and stuff. I'm not. That one's a little bit harder for me to understand. Maybe it's because they think that there's.
Oh gosh. There's so many.
But anyway, that's a whole different issue. So
I mean, I would say that, going back to what we were talking about in terms of access to larger facilities and that kind of capacity within a state, one of the big challenges for us all as constituents in the 21st century is going to be sort of separating issues and remaining functional in the way that we address needs. So it may be that these large institutions that they weren't operating quote unquote efficiently, or they weren't providing for the dignity or the safety that people who were within them needed, right? There could have been a whole list of things that had some truth to them. And also to just simply close those doors and not have an adequate or even larger capacity of resources dedicated to still meeting those needs. That's where this huge crisis was created. Yeah. And so that was driven out of, probably a Reagan era magical thinking about taxation.
Bootstraps. It's just like once you enable these people that have schizophrenia, once you enable them, they'll be able to work and make $70,000 a year, just like all of us. And then, it's nonsense. But okay. So have you had a chance to meet with the police chief and the city manager to establish your dominance? I know. I like the way that I worded it. I jokingly said it, but it is true that this is something that I've learned from the podcast. I was talking to the police chief of Springfield, and I was like, do you support a citizen review board? And he said, no. I mean, I do, as long as they don't have power. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, it's the city manager that hires the police chief, and it's the mayor that hires the city manager. And there's a reason that happens, because the city manager and the police chief are working. That's their job. They're 9 to 5. Yep. And so if they were politicking, then they wouldn't be able to work. Yep. And so, which, you're seeing right now, the different issue, but you're seeing the president can campaign and the person that's running is the vice president, and she has time or the president can and she can campain. That's a different tackle. That's a different issue. I don't want to get confusing, but there is an axis of evil, and it is the mayor, the city councilor, or the city manager, and the police chief. No, but have you met with the police chief and the city manager, gotten to know them, created a rapport? I know a lot of the far left supporters of you want to know that you made the police chief shake. I'm sure that you're not doing that. But what is your relationship with them been like so far? Have you had a chance to work with them? What is the city manager of Eugene like? I don't know them.
So I have, of course, had conversations with city manager of Eugene, who's Sarah Maderi. She's been the city manager of Eugene since just before COVID. I think at very end of 2019 was when she stepped into that role, and she had been the assistant city manager and worked in our planning and development departments and parks departments and really all across the city in a variety of roles and responsibilities at the executive level for many years. And when you meet Sarah and get to know her, she also, would absolutely tell you a story about, her full career within the city of Eugene after coming here to get her landscape architecture degree at the university.
Cool. Yeah.
So she started as a parks department staffer,
sure.
digging tree wells and stuff or something. I'm not sure. She described something like that. But so I do know Sarah, and we've had a chance to connect some. I'm trying to be thoughtful about not inserting myself as a sort of second mayor, future mayor circumstance. Our city council in Eugene, city manager, executive staff, mayor, they're all working on all of the current issues.
Right.
And, meeting a couple of times a week in public meetings, and then also with public hearings and public forums to engage with the community. So that work is ongoing literally every day of the week. And, my my approach in this last couple of months, and one of the reasons why I worked so hard to have the election outcome be so strong and to win in May, is that it's helpful to have this transition time, because there's not so much pressure to sort of pack everything in just a few days or a few weeks that also happen to include the holidays and all sorts of other stuff.
Yeah.
So I know Sarah pretty well, and I think, that she's been a really strong city manager for the city of Eugene, and has a lot of strong relationships across all of our different divisions and staff and folks. And I've met Chief Skinner as well. I saw him actually just maybe a week or two ago at a breakfast, and of course, have met him in different capacities around the community. He was a speaker at the City Club of Eugene when we were talking about the Lane County Public Safety Levy a year and a half or two ago. And
which Eugene supported overwhelmingly. I just want that to be clear, that a bunch of Democrats are like, please support your cops.
Yeah.
And
for the reason of, and I believe, because we mentioned earlier, Commissioner Trieger spoke, I think, at that same forum. Few people are aware of just how much addiction and mental health sort of service and bridging services are provided through our public safety system in Eugene. So that is one, major piece of why supporting that levy was so important, because connecting these different issues we're talking about, that's a major way that those current services are actually delivered through our community. And I look forward to working more, of course, with our city manager and police chief on a lot of different issues. There's, as you all well know, enormous questions about public safety, about, concerns related to policing, racial justice, discrimination, real concerns, though, also about just honestly access to services and, making sure that we're being responsive. And, I'm really looking forward to working with him and to working with our public safety folks and our emergency folks on all these different issues. I had a really cool meeting and tour with Chief Caven from Eugene Springfield Fire the other week, and was out at that main lot in kind of west central Eugene. And, that was really interesting, because it gave me a chance to hear some more details about some of the ways in which our emergency services and our fire department are being innovative to meet community needs.
Everybody likes the fire department, though. That's a different thing.
Well, easy to appreciate, but also important.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, also important to understand that, they fit when we think about the total needs of our community and public safety. In my mind, there's a lot of overlap between these different entities, because so often they are the people delivering the services.
Absolutely. So. And no, I think that now in Springfield, we have a new police chief, Shearer, and Chief Shearer. And now that we have a new chief, I think in both Eugene and Springfield, we have great representation in our police departments.
That's great to hear.
I think that the previous guy it's a good thing that we have a new one. So, but yeah, I met him. He was really cool, and we did the interview remotely because he was like, we don't want to do it at your house. I'm like, no, that's no, but so we're going to get out of here pretty soon, but we're going to mention a little bit about the election nationally, the presidential election. Actually, no, I'm going to say that the presidential election takes a lot of the oxygen, but we'll be voting on some major legislation here in Oregon. Yeah. There's two things that I want to mention, actually three. One is Measure 117 is ranked choice voting. I've been adamant on the podcast in my support of star voting. This is not star voting. It's not different ideal. Version. It's not great, in my opinion, ranked choice voting, but I think it's still an improvement on the system that we have in place currently. So look into that. Look into Measure 117, ranked choice voting, and make up your decision on that one. Yes. I did an episode, my last episode. You can go back and listen to Measure 118, the Oregon rebate. I had the chief petitioner, Antonio, on, and we talked about that. And, I'm not sure how I feel on that one. It's tough. It's a 3% tax on companies making over $25 million in sales. It is on gross sales. That part I have a hard time with. You can listen to that. We talked about how the math works out and all that. It's basically a bill that's going to put $1,600 on average in your pocket in the form of a tax rebate. And it would be a tax on major companies, big companies, but it does have ramifications. I'm on the fence. So you go to listen to my interview, and then also watch different stuff about Measure 118. Listen to both sides on that one. What have you been doing to get out the vote?
Oh, goodness. Well, I just shared today, and you mentioned it near the top of the podcast. It's an unusual circumstance to be running unopposed, so to speak, be on this
No,
ballot.
yeah.
But I have just been encouraging folks through all the social media channels that I have to get their Kaarin for Mayor signs back out into windows and balconies and lawns, because I think it's just another way of encouraging people to vote all the way through your ballot, right? And definitely be very engaged in local decisions and local election decisions. I think locally in Lane County, one of the most consequential issues that's on our local ballot is the Initiative 20.
I can't remember the exact number, but it's you're talking about the gerrymandering.
362, yeah. 362, 362.
I can't remember, but yeah.
20-362. And that's it's a gerrymandering effort that's presented, as a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's described as an independent commission that would then, draw up the maps for our Lane County Board of Commissioners. It was put forth by one individual in his own words. He said this in a public forum that I was at the other week, that it's on the ballot because he wanted it to be. And there's no reason to be redrawing these maps 3 years after they were just drawn by a process that's laid out in our Lane County Charter. And there's no new data to base these drawings on, because they're drawn in accordance with population that's a part of census data. So it is, for people who are listening, who really are thinking about their ballots, that's an important one to be paying attention to and to do outreach around. Because when you just read the name of it, it sounds like, an independent, redistricting committee. That sounds like a good idea. But we already have essentially that process in place, and the way in which that decision has come to voters. I have a lot of questions.
The way that I've understood it, it's like the county commissioners that are pushing this are county commissioners that in all likelihood will lose in the primary next election cycle. So they got to make sure that they get this shit done this time. And so, and look into the gerrymandering in Lane County. Just Google that and you're going to find a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. And gerrymandering is a site and a campaign that has lots of information and very straightforward.
Like I said, I'm in talks with Lori Trieger. I'm hoping to be able to do an episode. We're going to talk about that ballot measure, and I hope that's the next episode. I think that's what's going to be in the works. So hopefully that does play out. Now, with Kamala Harris now taking the reins as the candidate for president on the Democratic ticket, I want to give you a chance to speak on what it means to see a woman as a candidate for president and talk a little bit more about women in leadership. I'm the one that's making this a big issue, but I still think that it's a huge thing.
Thank you. Because if men made this an issue more frequently, including women's reproductive rights, the women would not have to stand up. I don't want to answer your question, but I have heard people on my show talk about how when you see women in leadership as a female, when you watch a woman in leadership, it gives you this hope that I could do that. And so when you start to see that happen more and more, I know that there's little girls in our community that you've met maybe at the softball game. Yeah. And they're like, "You're the mayor. I want to be mayor." Do you know what I mean? And so it's a beautiful thing. I mean, at this point, I don't know if I look and I'm like, is anyone ever like me going to be mayor of Eugene? No, but but I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, I mean, I think that, Kamala Harris and you have similar styles of, she seems like the kind of person that's really good at delegation, that is going to hire people and surround herself with really smart people. What is it called where you have a leadership skill where you enable the people around you? What is that called? I mean, I can't remember. I was reading something and I thought I was going to sound smart, but I'm not. But anyway, and you're meaning more than delegation. You're
empowering the people, because I think that good leadership isn't about being a strong man. Good leadership is making the people around you finding their most useful tool and have them focus on that. And then, each person can focus on what they're so good at. And then you can come together and make a better product, or project or whatever. So just let's hear what you have to say about, seeing her as the candidate for one, maybe give, a little bit about Joe. Let's talk about Joe Biden before we put him off to pasture. But then, no, that's
thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, he was,
for your service.
And
he's. I mean,
what a roller
one of the
coaster.
things. What a roller coaster every year for sure. It is. I am very excited to, as a one person with one vote, to have the opportunity to vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in a couple of weeks to be our next president and vice president. And I have a lot of reasons why. Many of them could be policy reasons. I think the fact that we have a governor as a vice president who's implemented some remarkably supportive policies across the state that he's governed is great, because that's like a test case for thinking about what's possible in our country if we just like line up our desired paths together. And I think that Kamala Harris is, as all women who are in positions of leadership like the one that she's in, she's extraordinarily experienced. She is very smart. She's incredibly capable. And she has been walking the knife edge of being a very powerful woman leader for a lot of years now.
Yeah.
So she's very, what I find as another woman watching her, she clearly has learned how to navigate a system that does not always reward women for being the smartest person in the room, the most experienced person in the room, the person most willing to make a hard decision, right? And I think she is all of those things. I think that it's very disheartening to see, and I do see this through different lenses, to see the amount of misinformation that is being pushed out into our country, because honestly, I think this is a very strong presidential ticket.
Yeah,
and I think it's
not just about the lesser of two evils for once.
Yeah, and it really, I think, also is a ticket that's like, these people want to go to work for us.
Yeah,
like they will work and do important things in terms of policy and leadership that will actually help people. And I would say that the reason why we've gotten into this disoriented space related to leadership in our country is the disconnect between, who we've elected and how they're helping. And social media doesn't help at all. I was on the airplane a couple of weeks ago coming back from speaking at a conference in Montana, and I looked, across the aisle at a woman who had her social media open on the airplane. And it was like looking into a different world. It wasn't political, but it was so clearly a different curated universe that she was receiving through her own pocket supercomputer. And it just made me think yet again that, we have these tools that we have access to that we're not using, for their highest and best use. We're using them, to fracture understanding, and in many cases actively to divide people and rile people up and get people angry at one another. But I really do feel like that if folks take a moment to look at the policy positions, but also just to listen to the people involved, I feel like they are serious and honest people who want to go to work for us. And the other ticket, I can't even describe it as Republican, because I know a lot of Republicans. I know a lot of conservative people. I grew up in 2 states that were red and purple, and then turned red through my young life. And the Trump-Vance ticket is not a political position. It's something very different from that I find to be dangerous and disorienting.
I watched the debate with JD Vance, and he's a smooth talker, and he has this. I was listening to this podcast. They were talking about how he uses mimic theory, which is that he acts as if he's the smartest. He's like the smartest person in the room. So he was mimicking Tim Walz's Southern charm, and that's the way that he can Midwestern charm, and that's the way that he can pull away from it and take from it. And he's so strategic.
Fascinating.
And yeah, but the way that he said one thing that really got under my skin. I made a quick little blog. I've been doing these blogs that are kind of AI enhanced. I put a lot of prompt into it, but I'm really just trying to try stuff out, because I've never been a blog writer, but I'm trying to get more into it. But I was talking about it, and I didn't bring this up in the blog for one reason, because it makes my stomach turn. But when they were talking about women's health rights, and JD Vance was saying, look, I support choice, so that when a woman has the baby, and I'm like, you're literally contradicting, you're basically saying that we have one option, and it's to take the pregnancy to term, and it just was so disingenuous in the way.
So I want to say something about why dangerous and disorienting are the descriptors that I use to describe them.
Yeah.
And that's because the vice presidential debate, and I have very little expectation that most people watched or listened to that whole debate. And I guess part of also the reason why I said fascinating a few moments ago it is strange to watch a person be so comfortable lying for such an extended period of time. And I say that because listening to J.D. Vance's answers to questions, and yes, mimicking Tim Walz and the Harris
And the
Walz
moderators
positions
and
throughout the evening, most of what he says and most of what he said has no place within the Trump-Vance universe and platform. Like, listening to that debate, you would have thought that they support healthcare, public schools,
Right.
gun control.
I mean, he said that
women's rights.
He
Like,
literally
it was
said that Trump saved Obamacare.
It was
like, which is the most ridiculous thing ever.
And because when I was in high school, we read 1984. Like, and I'm sure that high school kids still read it now. There was a lot of that debate that I just thought, this is disturbing in a way that is it's hard to watch, because as a person who was just elected for their first time as a public servant and as someone who's meant to represent community concerns, it was very important to me. And one of the most challenging things I think about running for any position, being a candidate for any elected position, is that if you care about telling the truth, there are, of course, going to be people who disagree with you, right? Who maybe get angry with you for the positions that you have. But I feel an enormous responsibility to honesty in this role. And I think one of the reasons why so many people are so discouraged and disconnected from our current experience of government is that we've had some folks who are not honest.
Yeah.
And I think that, J.D. Vance is a new era of a very disingenuous political figure. And that's disorienting.
That's the
and
word
dangerous.
that I use. Yeah.
So
yeah. You know what I heard?
I don't like them.
You know
very
what I
much.
heard, that the reason that Trump chose him and not Marco Rubio is because, and this is anecdotal, I don't know, but this is what I heard.
Peter Thiel is the answer?
No, I heard that Trump was saying that he was concerned that if he picked a Marco Rubio, that the establishment Republicans would have him killed. That they would be like, he wanted to pick somebody so extreme that it was MAGA.
Jeez,
because
yeah.
And now we see, and after that pick, that there's been assassination attempts. And I want to segue that into what I'm going to end every episode until the election with, is that this podcast does not condone any political violence of any kind.
Oh my goodness.
And I just want to be that, I want to make that completely clear. I even wrote it in my notes, condemn political violence, because no matter what, I don't support that in any way whatsoever. I do support, I do think that the destruction of property sometimes is necessary, and it takes a lot to get to that point. And I'm not going to even have you included in that. But I'm just saying, like, my meaning is when I see the people in the South and they're spray painting statues, when nothing has been done to listen to those people, then that's one thing, because that's a thing that can be replaced. But I do not ever, support hurting another human being for political reasons, or for any reason for that matter. And so I just want to be clear of that. But yeah, I read that there's a lot of belief that Trump was concerned that the establishment Republicans will be like, okay, you've done our dirty work and now we can get rid of you, whether it's through impeachment or what, because they could get him voted out and then they'd have some establishment guy like a Marco Rubio. So they doubled down, and we'll see if it pays off for them. I'm nervous about this election because I think it's as close as it's going to get, and I'm worried that it's going to be in the courts. And if it's not decided by the voters, I think we're going to have a lot of problems. But
I want to encourage everyone, since that was such a nice segue, to absolutely, and especially in this next couple of weeks, to encourage everyone that you know to participate. To
make a
sure
voting
that you're
plan.
Registered. Make sure that you've got your address up to date. There's so many websites that you can immediately check everything. I did just for fun, because I wanted to make sure before I shared it a few weeks ago on my own social media that it was just as perfect and crystal clear as I was expecting it to be, as a resource, right, for folks. But make sure that you are doing all that you can to encourage others to participate, because I feel very strongly that, and I think also Tim Walz expressed this in the debate, in the earnestness of his engagement in that collection of questions. I have a lot of faith in people, And it's an easy time to feel like we shouldn't have any faith in each other. And I just am unwilling to prescribe to that perspective. And I think that encouraging people to participate, encouraging people to vote, building the habit of voting, especially if you are a young person or have never voted in an election, right? In Oregon, we make it really easy. Other places, it's not as easy. But that just being a part of those decisions is really, really important. It's an important habit to have for yourself. And I think that when we vote, we end up with better leaders.
Absolutely.
And
I will say one thing. I have good news. So I have 2 stepsons, and one of them a year ago moved to Michigan. So I was reading that his vote is like 30,000 Californian votes. So
it's a strange
so
system,
all of you
but
people
it's
listening
true.
that are mad about what I'm talking about, my son's vote is going to counteract 30 million of yours.
But
So-
you still need to vote because we need you down ballot for sure.
Well, I'm talking to the
Yes.
MAGAs, but like both of them are there listening. But hey, Kaarin Knudson, the mayor-elect from Eugene, Oregon, it is always a treat to get to know you better, to get to talk to you, to chat with you. I'm excited to see what you do. If you do not fix homelessness in 100 days, then I'm going to be disappointed. So
Yeah,
good
the
luck. No,
expectations
I
are
have
high.
to say, and I don't know the numbers. I want to look at that report. I think we've made tremendous progress. I think
have
that
made
the people that
progress,
have
yeah.
put work in, whether it's the activists, the politicians, the people that work at the county, at the state, the city level, I can look around and see, and it feels like we've made a lot of progress with homelessness. I don't know the exact numbers, and I don't want to celebrate too quickly, but it feels like we've made a lot of progress from 4 or 5 years ago. So
we are making progress, and we will continue to make progress, and it will absolutely continue to be a focus of the work we have to do in our community, and that I will do for Eugenians as your mayor, because we will all benefit by rising to this
Follow her on
occasion.
the socials, because Kaarin for mayor is a great place to get a lot of important information. And make sure that you follow whatever city you live in, and even the neighboring city. You can follow their Facebook pages, because unfortunately that's the world we live in nowadays. You might even have to put where you're getting those notifications more. There's ways that you can check on social media so that you get an added enhancement to the notification system, because during the crises with the ice storm, sometimes the only way that we're going to get our information is on our cell phones. And so it's really important to follow those pages. But Kaarin Knudson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty. See you all soon.